All right, folks, welcome to the GreenCourt Connections podcast. I'm your host, Jay Bland, Chief Growth Officer here at GreenCourt. GreenCourt Connections exists to help connect our listeners on a deeper level, the hardworking folks that work in and interact with government agencies and court systems. We've got a very special guest today. She's one of the most innovative, adventurous, and caring folks I have ever met in human services. In fact, when I was the new awkward kid with braces in class, she took me under her wing and made me feel like I belonged. She leads one of the most efficient programs in the country and has for a few years now. So welcome Kristie Gordy, Wyoming Senior Administrator, Economic Security Division, and so the 4D Director. Welcome.
Hi, thanks, Jay. It's wonderful to be here, and those are some very kind words. I really appreciate that. I don't think Jay's ever been probably the awkward kid with braces, but we're happy to have you in our community.
I appreciate that. Kristie, let's start off with some travel talk. You passionate about a few things. I've seen you snowboard, which is really impressive, and I've seen your love for soccer, and I've seen your love for travel. A couple of those interests intersected recently on an overseas trip you took.
Sure, yeah. One of the most incredible adventures I've had thus far. So yes, love traveling home and abroad. This one, I was lucky enough to travel with my niece, which made it even more special. And we went over to New Zealand and Australia, and we were able to watch the Women's World Cup. Incredible experience in that, who I was with, watching some amazing women play a game that not only myself, but my niece love, and also just meeting incredible people along the way and seeing beautiful, beautiful countries.
Was that flight?
Oh, not terrible, Jay. How to get from here, we flew from Denver to LA, and then LA to New Zealand was just about 12 and a half hours, and then coming home, Sydney, Australia, back into LA was about 13.
I'm one of those people that love to travel, but I have travel anxiety. You can ask my parents. Whenever I was a kid, I would say, "Where are we going?" And they would tell me, and I would say, "Well, how far away is it?" It was too far in the car, too far in the air. I didn't want to do it. So I opened up a little bit. My wife and I have traveled recently overseas. I'm getting more accustomed to the long travel days. What was your favorite thing you saw in New Zealand?
Oh my gosh. I don't even know how to answer that, which I know probably sounds silly, but so many incredible things to see in so many different parts of that country that we were able to experience. It's beautiful, I will say, just incredibly beautiful. Gosh, what else in New Zealand? There was a really amazing, it's called a glowworm cave, which I think that was pretty special because you can only see it if you go to it. You're not allowed to take pictures. So it's something you can only experience if you go and you do it. And I appreciated the fact that it was, no electronics. We all live with electronics every day. And sometimes to have really great experiences, you do without. And then, of course, I would say every soccer game we went to was an amazing experience, watching different countries, but really strong leaders, strong women playing an incredibly beautiful game.
I'd say Wyoming is a lot like New Zealand. So since we're talking about
if only outside of wind, that might be the only thing we have in common is it's windy.
If someone were to visit Wyoming for the first time, what's the first thing they should see or do?
So I'm going to tell you probably the first thing that everybody thinks about. And so it's going to depend on where you are because Wyoming is quite vast when it comes to the amount of space. So it's going to depend on where you are. Most people think of Wyoming and they think of Jackson, which is, I will not say don't go there. It's an incredibly beautiful place. The Tetons are magical. It doesn't matter how many times I see them. Every time I see them, I think they're magical. Yellowstone is incredibly beautiful. So that neck of the woods, you need to go there, I think. But there are other beautiful places in Wyoming a lot of outdoor, just natural beauty here. Wind River Range is another one, as is the Bighorn Basin. So depends on where you are. I think there's amazing places to go no matter where you visit.
There's is it a rodeo every year in Cheyenne?
Isn't it funny I didn't even bring that up, Jay? That's in my hometown, so thanks. Yeah, across the street from where I live. So also, if you're not going to Jackson, but you love rodeo and country music and concerts, every year, the last 10 days, I believe, of July is Cheyenne Frontier Days. So it's the largest outdoor rodeo in the world, which I think is, if you love rodeo, it's a big deal. But also there's concerts and bull riding along the way. It is really a great experience. A lot of people from out of state and out of country actually come in and experience it. It's a lot of fun.
Georgia boy, that sounds like a lot of fun to me.
Skipped it last year to go to Australia and New Zealand. So
it's a worthy to take instead of going to Cheyenne. I doubt it was rodeo clown, so I must ask, what was your dream job when you were growing up?
Not not rodeo clown, but you might find it interesting. I think it's funny that I remember it, but I remember wanting to be a dolphin trainer. And that was the job in elementary school when you write down what do you want to be when you grow up. I'm far from a dolphin trainer, so I took a different path along the way. I don't even live anywhere where there's dolphins, so.
Have you been to one of those swim with the dolphin adventures?
I have, but only as an adult, so I'm not sure what reasoning behind being a dolphin trainer was when I was young, but that was my dream job.
I mean, it sounds cool. It looks cool. You saw the dolphin trainers, you went on your adventure. Were you jealous of them?
I don't think so. No. No, I don't think so.
I wanted to be a trash man. So on different paths, didn't we?
Maybe someday we can go back. Although I know there's a lot of schooling involved probably in dolphin training, so I don't want to go back to school. So
every Thursday is trash day here, and my son has to get up early, and we have to take him outside no matter how cold it is. We can watch the trash guys come take the trash can. So he's dreaming like his daddy did.
I would say it almost might. I think feel like it's going to be his dream job as well.
Speaking of kids and growing up and having mentors, who's been the most impactful mentor to you in your professional life?
I have two, Jay. It used to be one, but I think it's two now. So when I first started here at the Department of Family Services, shortly after coming in, a new director came in. We had a new governor, so we got a new director. His name was Steve Corsi, and he really has been one of the best mentors, and I think probably always will be someone that plays that role in my life ever. Just gave me a lot of opportunities, saw some things in me that maybe I didn't even see, and gave me chances to grow and do new things and take on new challenges, and just allowed me also to share thoughts and opinions, even if they were not same as his. So which I valued. It didn't mean he would agree with me at the end of the day, but I had a space and an opportunity to share. We had a conversation. So even at the end of the day, if the decision was made to be different than mine, I could get behind it because we had an opportunity to discuss it. Truly just a kind human, but an incredible leader in the same space. And then I would also say my current boss, the current director of this agency, Schmidt, also just has been an incredible mentor and leader, being a woman in a leadership space. There is something, it doesn't always have to be women for women, but there is something special if you have that. So being able to not just watch her navigate what she navigates, but just her ability to look across our leadership team and our agency and the visioning that she has been inspiring. And I think giving us our opportunities to, as you started, right, the podcast, to be innovative and to look at things differently and not micromanage, and really kind of give us the freedom and flexibility to move as we see best for the different programs that we are overseeing.
Your leadership style, interested, you talk about having space. Same way, I have a boss who gives me a lot of space, and that really is helpful for me to grow. Do you give that same space to your folks, or do you think they have to earn it first? Is that the default? How do you look at that?
At all. I think there shouldn't be a sense of having to earn it. We've hired people for a reason, or we should have hired people for a reason. I think hiring practices are incredibly critical and important. And I always say we hired you for a reason. We should be hiring people for a reason. And that is because we believe in them, and we believe that they can do not only the job that we've hired them for, but because we see something where they can bring something more to the agency or to the program specifically, or whatever it is that they're doing. So no, I don't think it's an earn. I think it is this is how we do business. I mean, obviously, if for some reason you run into issues, you address it like you would anything else. But definitely operate under the guise of giving space. We want innovation, and I want to give that, psychological safety to people to be able to really come in and do their job, but also if they see ways to do things differently and better, to propose those and give those to us and be willing to try them.
With you, my default is to trust, to earn that. Sometimes that gets me hurt, but my default is to trust. And hiring folks, my default is to give you the space you need to succeed or fail. And you talk about important is to give somebody space to bring an idea, even not the idea you go with.
Absolutely. And I think even sometimes, even if it's not the ideas we thought of, and I think sometimes that's hard. We all think sometimes, right? I think we do like our own ideas because we came up with them, but giving the space and opportunity to hear from others, I think not only you might hear better, and you're going to hear, not might. I mean, you're going to have instances in which you hear better ideas. And then it's how do you take those ideas and meld them with your own, or how do you put your idea aside because someone else has come up with something better? And I think I think we have an obligation and a responsibility to.
When you, in your office, when you have these think groups or you're thinking through ways to do things, important do you think diversified backgrounds are to those conversations?
I think it's hugely important. I think a lot of times when we think about things, it's getting right. I always say there's a great book, Good to Great, and one of the big concepts in there is getting the right people on the bus. And it's not just in hiring, but it's exactly to your point of if you're tanking or just, who's on your team and around the table is, I'm not a believer. I am not a believer in yes people. So I really respect those that are not yes people because you need to come in and give us different things to look at and think about. And I think when you bring people in from different backgrounds, cultures, whatever it is, diversification is the only way I think you can truly, truly ever grow, innovate. And if we all think the same around the table, we're not going to really get into any place special.
I agree completely. Talking about a lot about your leadership style, the child support agency. Let's back up a little bit. How did you get started in the child support program?
Sure. So background wise, law school. Once I graduated law school, I actually started at the Attorney General's office. Long story short, I didn't grow up in child support by any means. So that's another reason, right? I think it's so important to learn and listen to those that have. It's a good balance of people that have been in the space and those that have extreme knowledge in it. And so I came to the Department of Family Services, but when I first came here, I came as an ombudsman and I did as well as senior legal and policy. So my initial path into child support, as it was with every other program in the agency, was through policy and rules and dealing with people that maybe were upset. Then back, I think it was 2012, I believe, I was the interim director because some changes had happened within the agency. And again, this is my mentor, right? That I say is my mentor. Me an opportunity to roll into a position in which others might think, why the heck? She has no idea. She's never been in this space. Gave me that role and then became the 4D director. So joke and not joke sometimes, right? And the fact that my first real job in the child support world was as a 4D director.
Done a hell of a job that role. I think the numbers speak for themselves, which leads me into my next question. Your team there has been a top-ranked program quite a few years now. I went to Alabama, so she would refer to you as the Nick Saban of Wyoming sport program. How do you maintain that level of effectiveness for that many years in a row?
Amazing people, honestly, I think is my first answer to that. I think there's a lot of things that roll into that, Jay. But if you don't have people that want and show up every day because they believe in the work that we're doing and because they believe in helping children and families, we wouldn't be where we are, right? The last 10 years have been incredible. And I think we also have, it's all the things we've already talked about. It's the people that are around the table at the leadership level, but it's also the people in the field. And they're innovative. They're always looking. No one is resting on their laurels, right? No one's saying we have done an amazing job. We don't really need to do anything else. Let's just, skate along. It's really, we can do this better and we can do it better, and sometimes it's better because it's helping our staff, which is incredibly important that we have to keep in mind. I believe in a leadership role, it is our job, responsibility and obligation. We are here to support those. And one of the values of our agencies is supporting the people who support the families, which is our staff right there on the front line every day, serving families in different ways. And we need to do our best to support them. And what does that mean? It can mean so many different things, right? Do you have the tools? Do you have the skills? And sometimes it's the space because we need and want to hear from you. And so the people matter, especially in our program, because they bring so much to the table, which then makes my job, I say a lot. It's easy to be able to say we want to do this new innovation because they all will, thoughts. So we have to think through them, but more likely than not, they're on board and they show up. And I mean, they're incredibly, they take their jobs seriously. So they learn, they understand what they're doing so that when they're doing their job, they're doing it not just correct, but they're doing it to the best way possible. And I think another component has been we've looked at our culture. I mean, we've done some hard things. We've shifted our culture. We did this, back probably, I don't even know how many years ago now, where we said we need to approach engagement with families and even with each other differently, right? We did some motivational interviewing and that wasn't just a one-time, let's do this because we should. It was a true culture shift and change. And it's just now how we do business, right? It is just how we interact with people. We've been willing to look at our policies. We've been willing to look at our processes to say, maybe we didn't get this right and we have to own that. And then how do we make it right? And what does that look like? And then I think at the end of the day, you mentioned numbers matter, metrics matter because we have performance measures we have to meet, not just in child support, but across all of our other programs. But I think we're strong believers in that while we pay very close attention to those and we're constantly looking at ways to make sure we do them, we also believe, and I'm a big believer in, if we get our policies right, if we get our practices right, if what we're doing truly is helping families be successful, then our performance measures should follow that. Now, there's a lot in between that, but we lead a lot more with that than leading with numbers, right? Numbers matter. It's not what drives us to do the work we do.
Very well said. And you talk about the right people. It's so important. Lencioni, I think, talks about the 3 characteristics you need to have: hungry, humble, and smart. I've met a lot of your folks and they definitely check 3 of those boxes. You mentioned earlier about how kind of a experience, but you were a less than experienced person for your job. I've been there. I've always been the guy who's like, how the hell did he get? And that drives me. Nothing drives me more than one thinking I can't do something. Going back to 10 years ago, 12 years ago now, when you got this position, what's your inspiration to prove everybody wrong?
Yeah, and Jay, I don't know if it was a prove anybody wrong. And honestly, sometimes it was myself. I did a podcast on leadership with Grace Peak a few years back, and we talked some about this. And, one of their initial questions was, did you ever feel imposter syndrome? And I was like, absolutely not. But when I sat with it a little bit, I went 100%, right? And so I think other people, but I think sometimes we are our biggest barriers ourselves because we're afraid to fail, whatever fail means, right? We are afraid we're not going to do good enough. And sometimes we think we don't deserve to be where we are. And I definitely think there were times I felt that, but I think luckily for me, I had a good mentor, but I also believe, I was able to just sit down with myself and say, you know what? No, you may not have grown up in the program, but you deserve to be here for other reasons, right? You have earned a seat at the table. So now you have to own it. And what does that mean? And what can you do with that? And so, I had to put in a lot of work to learn, but I also believe our positions a lot, you need to understand and know the program, but you also maybe more importantly need to have the ability to lead people and programs and have relationships across things to be able to move things forward. And you can learn as you go, right? You know what you need to know, but we also have experts in our program that need to know those things. And I need to be aware of them, but I don't need to know them because they know them. Right. And so I think, right, but you have to put the work in, you have to put the effort in, and you have to be willing to do what you need to do. But like I said, I think a lot of the initial barriers I had wasn't proving other people wrong, but was proving to myself that I deserved to be where I was and that I could in fact do it and that I wasn't out of my league.
Kristie, you mentioned imposter syndrome. I could do a podcast just on imposter syndrome. There is, may not be conventional here, but I think most great leaders, a little bit of healthy imposter syndrome in you. And I speak myself, the fact that I'm always thinking somebody else is doing it better than we are. Somebody else is reading more than I am. Somebody else has a better work ethic than I do. That's pushing me along. It keeps pushing our team along. Think about that. Do you think there's a healthy level of imposter syndrome that helps drive you?
Yeah. And I think we have to own it a little bit. I think it's, it's there. I think it's natural, honestly. It's how we react to it, I think, is what matters the most, right? It's recognizing it exists and then figuring out how do I overcome and what does overcoming look and if I've been given this opportunity, how do I make the best out of this opportunity and actually give something back from being given this opportunity? And so you have to be able to move beyond. And I think some of that is you can do it in and amongst yourself, but some of it's just having an amazing support team. I would say, right, I had a mentor, but sometimes it's not just your direct mentorship. I would even say some of my best mentors have been my peers in this space, right? Some of my best people I have learned from and grown confidence from are peers within this space I came in with at the same time and that have become some of my best friends in the whole world, also drive you and support you along the way.
Shifting gears a little bit, talked a little bit about policy and whether we like it or not, politics affect policy and policy affects no other way to crack it up. That's the way it happens. Seen some of those policy changes recently with a shift from enforcement to engagement, which argue there's a piece of enforcement in engagement. I don't think they're antonyms, but we've seen that shift. What other shifts do you expect to see in the child support program as a whole over the next 10 years?
And great question. And it's important to recognize and stop and really sit and think about the program's been right for however many years, and I've only been in it 10. And the amount of change I've seen from the time I've come in till now is, I think, incredible because a lot of times in these programs, and as you mentioned before, right, my position is I oversee not just child support. I have SNAP, I have cash assistance, TANF, I have childcare assistance and housing and utilities. So many different federal programs. And it's fascinating to see the differences among them. And I have said along the way, I think other programs are moving now, but child support has been one of the most innovative and I also think forward thinking programs. And maybe it's not always been that way. And I think it takes leadership. It takes the people that are in it. It takes, the change they want to see. It's a culture shift. It's been a massive culture shift in this program, which I think has now put us to the place where we have no other choice, but we have to look at our policies and our processes because we're looking at the program differently and we're recognizing it's not just about enforcement. Enforcement's always going to be a component of child support, but it shouldn't always be our focus, right? There's so many more things when we think about child support. And when we talk about what do we want, like what do we see, about policies and processes, one of the things and you'll hear me say this and you've heard me say this is we need to look through child support through a different lens. I mean, we are one of the biggest support programs for families and children, and we have the ability to work across the aisle essentially with all of our other programs to do what's best for families. And what we know is if, child support's an economic concrete support for families, and sometimes it's the most beneficial that they can have if we can get it to them consistently. And if we can do those things and work with other programs, then what we know is children likely can stay safe at home, which is another one of our values here at the Department of Family Services. And we can give families opportunities for success. And if we can keep children safe at home, we hopefully can keep families out of crisis. We know research tells us that the majority of cases for child neglect are about 60% are because of poverty. So families are coming into that type of crisis because of poverty. And what an amazing opportunity we have within this program and across all of the other programs that we should be partnering with to help families on the front end so that they don't have to experience, that crisis and the child welfare system on the back end. So I think we've seen a shift in just not focusing on enforcement, but we've seen massive shifts in pass-through, which is working directly with the TANF program and moving money into the families instead of to us, right? We were a state where we did zero pass-through. We had no pass-through to families. We've since done 100 to 200 pass-through on current. And excitingly, we just rolled out last month or this month, January, 100% pass-through for former TANF cases, which is incredible. But again, a massive change in culture and policy. And I think we have a lot of opportunity to what we've made decisions on in the past and how we can do those differently, if we should do them differently, and then how we can work across the other programs to better serve families.
I'm glad you brought up pass-through because I was going to bring that up. I've been to a lot of conferences where we've seen a lot of people talk about this issue. It seems to be to a boil more and more over the past couple of years. A lot of really smart people guided on this issue. Some people I have a lot of respect for who say, no way. If there's a family who's welfare dollars and government, and then dad starts to pay, dad should pay some of that back to the government for what they did. Interested to hear you say Wyoming has moved to 100% pass-through because the issue that I've seen there be some political divide. Wouldn't have pictured Wyoming as being one of the first states to do 100% pass-through. How did that happen?
Sure. And let me clarify. So we're not 100% on current pass-through. So that's still Colorado and others. I know Michigan's working in that direction. We'd like to get there someday. So on current, we did the 100, 200 strategically because we don't have to pay a federal portion. But what we just did 100% on is those cases that were former TANF cases, right? So former, not anymore, but if we get a collection, we would be keeping that money. And now we're saying, no, money should go to families. And yes, Wyoming is a conservative state, and it doesn't mean can't look and shift policies, because what I think our responsibility is, and what I appreciate about the agency that I'm in and the leadership that we have here, is our lens is to look at families, and our lens is to look at how do we help families be successful, whatever that success is, right? And how do we help them be secure and stable so that they can be safe at home and their children have an opportunity for success. And what we know is putting these dollars into the family on the front end is a way to do that. And so I think we're always going to across these things because there are policy decisions. It's unlikely that everyone will agree upon them, and that's okay. But here we see the benefit, and we just see the criticality and making policy shifts to benefit families.
Should be no political divide on helping families. If there's anything we can agree on, it should be something everyone should agree on. And I think that's amazed me about the child support community. I'll get together so many times a year. There are conservative states and liberal states and very liberal states and very conservative states and leaders of these programs that get together, and you could not listen to them speak for an hour. Couldn't tell me what political party they affiliate themselves with. To me, that's so refreshing. We just all fight so much for so many things that are unnecessary. And the child support community, I think they set the standard for how have people from different backgrounds and different political differences come together and figure out what's the best thing for the family, for our political party, for what I think, but for the families. Do you get that same feeling in the child support community?
I think, Jay, you're absolutely right. And I say all the time, I'm so lucky and honestly blessed to be a part of this community. I've grown so much being a part of it and engaging with the people that you get to engage with. And not just from a director level and director, which is also super incredible and unique to the child support space. And I think another reason why we see this program forward and grow is at all the levels. I mean, it's all the different partners we have. I mean, we give space to bring staff in on different things, if it's a conference or, conversations. I'll also say it's a connection and a partnership relationship with vendors, with the private world as well. We can't do it alone. We can make policy decisions and process decisions a lot of times in order to write things into place and then to implement. We need help. Private sector. And I think that this is a space that embraces that, recognizes the importance of that. And I just think the relationships and the friendships that exist truly are one of the reasons that we see things that you mentioned, right? We see play out, and also that we just see the amount of money and dollars, if you want to get down to brass tacks, that are collected and go to children and family every year across the United States.
I think we would both agree that neither one of us have done everything perfectly, or a lot about successes, and of course that's important. But I want to ask you, does a particular failure, professional failure, come to mind really helped shape you?
So this, honestly, Jay, is the question, and struggle is not necessarily the right word, but it is one. Right when you sent the questions, I looked at it, I was like, gosh, I really need to think about this one. And it's not because I'm like, gosh, I have no failures. It's because such an interesting space, and I think we really have to get to it. I'm going to tell you about mine, but I think I want to take the opportunity to say, especially from a leadership perspective, is space of failure, right? And it is everything a failure, and is every failure negative, right? We make mistakes. We're going to make mistakes. Staff are going to make mistakes. Families are going to make mistakes, right? Families are going to fail. And so what is it that we're going to do when those things happen, right? What is our culture and our environment when things happen, right? I'm reading a book. I was lucky enough to listen to a presentation. Her name is Amy Edmondson. She wrote a book, and it's called, I'm looking at it so I get the title right, Right Kind of Wrong, Science of Failing Well. And just hearing her, I haven't made it through the whole book, hearing her speak about this truly is, I think it's such an interesting space, because we all say, oh, we know we're going to fail. We'll just work as long as you learn from it, which is easier said than done. Are we making sure people are learning from mistakes and failures? But it's also really a conversation around different types of failures, right? And yes, some failures can be catastrophic, while others are can prevent them. And it's an interesting take, and a lot of it is about psychological safety, right? And what is it we are providing to our teams and to our organizations and to our staff and just to our, the people we're working with? Are we really providing a space in which, if we say, I want you to go try things, if it doesn't work, it's okay? Not the reality, or as if it doesn't go okay, is actual consequences happening? It's understanding the different, severity and potential consequences along the way. So I think this book is incredible. I think it's an incredible space for us to focus on, because I say this, we are at an incredible rate modernizing not just technology, but policies and practices. And along the way, we may have missteps. And so how are we going to, address those? And how are we going to make sure provide maybe a safe space for that, but not a safe space to just have your disregard? There's a difference between disregard and something bad happening and a lot of effort, things going into it, and it not going the way we planned. So that's not usually my soapbox, but since you asked about it and I read this book and listened to her, it's been a space that I think, because there's so much changing opportunity for that we really do have to think about how we approach things and people. So lots of mistakes across the board, but I would say, honestly, you say that shaped you. Interestingly, my example, or the thought that came to me, was it's happened in the last year. So, right, you're not void of failures, even when you sit in, positions like ours. And sometimes you see be stagnant, or we see things just get on hold because we're afraid to, right? Because I think there is a lot at jeopardy personally if you fail professionally. So, we had a big project, a big IT modernization project inside of child support, right? And I think the biggest lesson is it wasn't a complete failure, right? Not catastrophic. It did not go the way we intended, right? It has not, in what our terms would say, it successful implementation. And so there are things that now have to be continued done to get it there. It happened. We'll get it there. But maybe, more dollars have had to be spent than we originally wanted. Relationships didn't really pan out the way we had hoped. I think the biggest lesson out of that is things happen, but did we do enough on the front end to avoid it? And I think that's when you talk about lessons learned, at least for me, is this instance, no. I think technology is such a huge thing happening right now. And you've probably heard me say this before, and I'll keep saying it. This project is a prime example. We did not take the time to look at our processes and to look at our policies to say, we have these rights. Because technology can't fix processes. Technology can't fix bad policies. So it's taking and making a concerted effort and being intentional to say we may be, and we're likely not doing the best we can for processes. Those are processes, right, that affect our staff and how we have them doing their job. It's also processes on how families have to engage with us, right? So it's looking across the board. We didn't do that, right? And so now we're saying, right, in a stable place before we go and, make things what we want them, we're going to look at processes. We know that that's successful because we've seen it happen in other projects we've done. I think that's incredibly, you have to have a shared vision among your entire team as you're moving these projects forward. It can't just be, it's your vision from the top or the vision from your program manager or who the field, it has to be this shared vision that everyone has come together. Maybe there's differences on certain things, but overall we have a shared understanding of where we want to be. And the last thing I would say on this, and I think it's terribly important because of money and people. We are, I would say, in most places, right? We're not overwhelmed with so many staff that we don't know what to do with them. We are likely operating bare-boned with as least amount of people that we can, right? You do projects like this, and I think what we found is I made assumptions when assigning roles from internal staff. They could do, right, project management, or they could do things related to these large, not just IT projects, I think anything, right? But this is just a prime example. Technology is a different thing than business, right? They have to work together. Business should drive IT, but sometimes you don't have an understanding. And if you don't have someone that can blend or mix the two, right, or basically translate for you, things go wrong. And so made assumptions that people had the skills and capacity to do things that they just didn't. That's a failure on our part, right? That's a failure. And we have to recognize and own that, man, things maybe not be going well, not because that person's bad, really good at the job they do and what we need them to do. This is not that. So it's being willing to provide, we have to be able to provide whatever those resources are for those projects. Because I would say most of the time, at least I know in our agency, we don't have, internal staff don't have the capacity or the skills or knowledge to do some of those things like project management, right? That is a whole skill set in and of itself. So it's recognizing that, knowing that if you're doing it, you need to really be intentional and mindful around who we have staffing things and who can do what. If we don't have it internally, then we need to budget for it, bring it in an external partner to help us with it. So that was a lot, but I think there's a lot goes within these things that forget about are so critical for things to be what we consider successful.
I love that answer. I love that story. It's kind of a weird thing that I do. I keep a lot of notebooks, like old school composition books. One of them is, if I'm ever asked to give a commencement speech, a graduation, the things I would say. And on the first page of that book, kind of my lessons learned is don't be scared to fail. I've seen so many people, our industry and our company, who are so hamstrung by the inability to make a decision because they're scared to fail. You just gotta do it. Think about this podcast right here. A million reasons why I shouldn't do this. A million reasons why we could have said this is a bad idea. But what if nobody listens to it? What if nobody likes it? Who cares? My background is a sheet. I look like I've been kidnapped. I mean, my favorite saying is you don't need more time. You just need to act. I could have waited on the background to come in and record this. I could have waited till everything was perfect. I could have waited till I didn't have a cold to speak to you. You don't need more time. You just need to act. You damn sure can't be scared to fail. So appreciate you sharing that with us. What was the name of that book one more time?
The name of the book is Right Kind of Wrong, Science of Failing Well. The author is Amy Edmondson.
I was going to say, Amy, we're probably going to sell you some books on this thing, and we don't expect any type of kickback, but we're not.
I know we're probably running short on time, Jay, but I think to the last point you made is I think, right, there is a balance, right, being risk takers and risk adverse. And you can't be to a point of where you just where you have disregard for everything, like I said earlier. But I think you're absolutely right. I think we have to get to a place we are willing to take some risk. But you can start small until you get to a point where you are more comfortable with it. And I think it lends itself for growth. Have to be willing to sit in the uncomfortable and sometimes to own mistakes and failures that happen.
You're exactly right. Saying you're not scared to fail doesn't give you a license to be reckless. I mean, you don't. Early in my career, I had someone describe me as a cowboy. I took offense to that because cowboys are reckless. But no matter how you shake it up, you're there in Wyoming. We talked about frontier days. Being on a 2,000-pound bull and riding it, that's reckless. It's absolutely reckless. So I didn't like that comment. To not be scared of failure and to act and to be bold doesn't give you a license to be reckless. Completely agree. The final question, and this one's been interesting. Everybody I've talked to has had a completely different answer to this. What do you want your legacy to be, Kristie?
I think I want my legacy to be that when you look back, or when people get what you've done, or back to your time and the position you had, is want to be thought of as someone who was compassionate, not just compassionate to families, compassionate to staff, innovative. I think innovation is so incredible. So I think a legacy is instilling innovation, instilling compassion, instilling this growth mindset into agency and into this program. And really just to anybody I have a chance to talk to, is that's what I'd like to be known for. It's not, right, you had a successful performing program for 10 years, or you did this project. It is, for me, much bigger. It is leaving legacy that can be carried forward by whoever is here, into place the culture and just the excitement, I guess, for the people that are here, move it forward. But also, when you think about the flip side, not that we don't do a great job right now here interacting or engaging with families outside of serving them. I'd love to also have a legacy of how we do business is, like I said, compassionate, kind, thoughtful. Families that are the most vulnerable sometimes are dealing with the hardest things that some of us will never have to experience. And showing up and doing that every day, but doing it in the most respectful way possible. Also doing it in a way that you're constantly looking for ways to do it better and to provide services better to families. And us just as a whole understand that really the only way we make a difference is working together. And that's not just within our program here in Wyoming, across every program in the United States. It's across not just the child support program, but every other program that exists today for families. And until we really start doing that, and I think we've started, we won't really give families everything they need. And we need to give families the opportunity to help us know what success means to them. The parting thought, which ties back to one of the other questions, is our performance measures in child support and across other programs may not be a measure of success for a family. I would love for us, and if I had a legacy, it would be that we really mindfully, intentionally looked at that, didn't just look at it, acted on it. That when we looked at our programs, we could 100%, or not 100%, we could confidently say, we know the services we provided actually helped the family.
Love that answer, and I felt that answer, which usually means it's truthful. I love this question because you can describe yourself however you want. I'm always interested to hear the way you describe what you want your legacy to be match up with what I see, I perceive. Say it absolutely does. I mean, passionate, yeah. I mean, I think I described you as that in the intro. Innovative, absolutely. With mindset, teamwork, open-minded, passion for families and what success means to them. Checking all those boxes so far, Kristie. Now, you and I both have a long way to go in this life, both professionally and personally. So we can either submit our legacy or screw it up. So let's not celebrate yet.
Yeah, thanks, Jay. Reality check, right? More failures to come.
I appreciate you joining. Always love talking to you. I look forward to seeing you in a couple weeks in DC.
I can't wait to see you, and I appreciate this opportunity. Thanks for thinking of me. It's been great.